For those who have been patiently waiting for VR to give you a reason to get off the couch and flail your arms around, Asgard's Wrath 2 might very well be the incredibly ambitious open-world game you've been waiting for. Not only does this standout sequel manage to masterfully imagine what a massive, big-budget RPG should look like in VR, it astonishingly reinvents itself several times throughout its 90-plus hour runtime, making those hours absolutely fly by. The 4 playable characters are extraordinarily different from each other, and mastering them all is a blast. The deep RPG mechanics and loads of secrets to discover make the temptation to keep the headset on for just a little longer a seriously troubling habit, and the combat, exploration, and puzzles make every new dungeon an action-packed, deeply satisfying adventure that easily surpasses almost everything that's previously been accomplished in virtual reality. Asgard's Wrath 2 is the kind of landmark game changer that only comes around once in a blue moon. And in a year already jam-packed with extremely good games, this is easily one of my favorites.
I know you're close.
This is a game that takes all the most important parts of your Skyrims and your Zeldas and reimagines them for virtual reality from the ground up, with amazing success. Playing as a god who possesses mortals to help them fulfill their destinies, you'll roam interesting open-world areas from vast deserts to spooky plains of the afterlife, navigate treacherous dungeons, loot chests, recharge and socialize back at the hideout with NPCs you befriend along the way, and even kick back with a fishing rod, 'cause why the heck not? Building upon the many successes of its stellar predecessor, this superb sequel improves and expands upon just about everything, from combat and exploration to the significantly more fleshed out animal companions who accompany you on your journey. It's true that Asgard's Wrath 2 might not look or perform as well as games running on high-end hardware, but it more than makes up for that deficit with its innovative ideas and incredibly fun gameplay, and pushes the limits on what's possible on its native device. In other words, this is the Tears of the Kingdom of the Quest 3. It transcends hardware limitations by just crushing it in every other area.
A little spirit might get this working.
The story picks up where the last game left off, right after your god character was very predictably betrayed by the famously untrustworthy god of mischief, Loki. If you didn't play the first one, there's a strong recap to catch you up, but all you really need to know is that Loki's not a very nice guy and you hate him. After being plucked from your prison by a higher power, you're sent on a seemingly unrelated quest to Egypt while you wait for your opportunity to get revenge on the Norse trickster.
I never did forget.
VR games have a well-earned reputation for often being short and sweet, but Asgard's Wrath 2 defies that expectation. Though I tried to complete most side quests, I didn't even approach a completionist run and still found myself sinking in an astonishing 91 hours before I rolled credits. You might decide to take a break from the main quest to partake in a slingshot shooting gallery or a pinball-like minigame at your hideout, or stumble onto a completely optional quest where you possess a monkey, or craft special bait to lure a giant scorpion out of hiding to duel you. It's seriously crazy just how much they crammed into this thing. One of the most impressive things Asgard's Wrath 2 manages to fit into its enormous adventure is its 4 playable protagonists, each with their own weapons, abilities, storylines, and open-world map to let them loose on. You learn the ropes as Abraxas, a traditional sword and shield warrior who serves as an approachable starting point. But then you'll find yourself controlling increasingly more outlandish mortals until suddenly you're throwing your own decapitated head at your foes to possess them. One of the more inspired heroes, Cyrene, is a river naiad with an affinity for aquatic life, so all of her weapons are living sea creatures, like a hilarious octopus harp that's both a musical instrument and a bow, and a lovable eel that wraps around her arm so its tongue can be used as a melee weapon. Totally normal stuff. Each playstyle is such a departure from the last that finishing one saga and unlocking the next character feels like diving into a completely different game, which does wonders to extend the life of an adventure that would feel massive with just one character, especially by the standards of VR. Of course, helping a quartet of mortals fulfill their destinies is bound to involve lots of fighting, and Asgard's Wrath 2 knocks it out of the park here too. While the first entry's combat was great, it primarily focused on melee and forced you to play defensively and whittle down opposing shields before pressing the attack. But in the sequel, you're given a whole lot more freedom. Now you can go on the offensive to remove enemy shields, play it safe with ranged attacks, yank flying enemies to the ground with your whip, or use special abilities to do fancy things, like charge at one of the magnificently toned humanoid lizards to knock it flat on its back. That variety and depth with each hero extends into their incredibly dense skill trees, which unlock tons of buffs and meaningful powers that add even more interesting ways to use your equipment. One skill lets your elf archer character Alvida turn her mines into turrets when she shoots an arrow at them. Another lets Abraxas toss his shield, then whip it to turn it into a deadly pinball that bounces around the area. Then there's the usual stuff like crafting weapons and armor for you and your companions, brewing potions or cooking food, and making traps to be deployed in battle. They give you a whole lot of reasons to gather coins and crafting materials, and in all my time hanging out in Egypt and beyond, I never once found myself in a situation where I was not excited to find more of one material or another. It's also impressive just how good the puzzles are, making smart use of each hero's unique arsenal as well as your companion's abilities. You'll find clever sections where you have to throw Abraxas' axe onto a button, then use its redirecting ability to slide it in the right direction. Or use Cyrene's Harptopus to play a musical tune that guides a sea creature over to a flower, growing a vine you can then climb. Other areas were less about being smart and more about using my reflexes to platform through dangerous trap-filled areas. Shockingly, all that yanking myself across gaps with a whip and wall running past swinging death traps gave me absolutely no motion sickness and made me feel like the badass god I was playing as. The best puzzles, though, combine your mortal and godly forms by allowing you to toggle back and forth between them. As a giant being, you can manipulate the world around you, then jump back into your puny mortal body to get through the area. In one memorable level, I helped Abraxas get around an otherwise unnavigable shipwreck by simply picking up and moving pieces of its shattered hull so he could wall run on them to the next area. Creative sections like this managed to keep me on my toes right up until the end, and that's no small feat.
A simple matter.
With so much packed into Asgard's Wrath 2, it's not surprising that it does suffer from occasional performance issues on the MetaQuest 3. You can expect the frame rate to hitch every so often, some long loading screens, and even a hard crash or two that will pluck you out of Egypt and send you back to your far less interesting living room. I also encountered a couple annoying bugs, like one time where my companion got frozen by an enemy's ice attack that never broke free even after that ice was destroyed. However, these issues were rarely bad enough to frustrate me, and certainly not common enough to be much of a distraction when spread across such a large adventure. Instead, they were the same kinds of wonkiness I'd expect from any open world game of this size, and in fact, I'd put this one on the less troublesome side of normal. Asgard's Wrath 2 is the full-fledged open-world RPG I've always wanted to play in VR, but it's also just one of the best RPGs in any perspective I've played in years. With 4 unique characters and stories, fantastic and satisfying combat, intricate and rewarding RPG systems, and awesome open-world areas filled with smart puzzles and so much stuff to do, this masterpiece completely nails essentially everything it attempts, much of which has never been pulled off in VR before. The MetaQuest 3's killer app has arrived, and even after more than 90 hours throwing squids at gloriously shredded lizards and whipping across gaps, I'm still eager to go back in for more. Seriously though, it's hard to overstate just how much there is to Asgard's Wrath 2. For example, I didn't even get a chance to talk about its extremely robust and completely optional roguelite mode. You can check out our full written review on IGN.com for even more about this incredible game, or watch recent VR reviews like Arizona Sunshine 2 and Assassin's Creed Nexus VR. And for everything else, stick with IGN.